The Brotherhoods, how cultism began in Nigeria. Whispers in the night. The hostel was quiet that night. But not silent. If you listened closely, you could hear it, the low murmur of young men gathered in one corner of the room. A lantern flickered, casting long shadows on the cracked walls. Their voices were hushed, but heavy with anger. One of them slammed his fist on the table. Enough is enough. They treat us like slaves. We cannot keep quiet forever. The others nodded. Eyes sharp. Hearts burning. They wanted more than lectures, more than books. They wanted a voice. They wanted power. And in that dimly lit room, something was born. The first flame, the Pirates. 1952, University of Ibadan. 7 students sat together, plotting a revolution of their own. At the center was a young man, bold and restless. His name, Wole Soyinka. He leaned forward, his voice steady. If we must be heard, we must stand united. Not as tribes, not as individuals, but as brothers. They raised their glasses in agreement. And thus, the Pyrates Confraternity was born. At first, it was not a thing of fear. It was pride. They wore their red caps like crowns. They called themselves the Magnificent Seven. They spoke against oppression, mocked corruption, and stood tall against colonial arrogance. They were the voice of students who had none. But the thing about fire is, once it starts, it spreads. The rivals, when others rose. By the late 1960s and 70s, the Pirates had become a legend. Everyone knew them. Everyone feared their influence. But not everyone wanted to follow them. One evening, in another campus hostel, a different group of students gathered. They whispered, "Why must pirates think they are the only ones? Why must they control everything?" And so came the Buccaneers. Not long after, the Vikings. Then the Eiye. And the Black Axe. Each group with its own symbols, colors, and chants. Each one promising brotherhood, strength, and protection. Soon, university life was no longer just about classes and exams. It became a battlefield of loyalty. The hostel was a shift in power. A new student enters the hostel for the first time. His bag still dusty from travel. He doesn't know anyone. He doesn't know who to trust. But the whispers begin. Whose side is he on? Does he belong? Or is he alone? At night, doors creak open quietly. Groups gather in rooms where candles burn low. Oaths are whispered. Promises are made. A new brother is initiated into the fold. And slowly, the campus begins to change. Where once there was laughter, there is now tension. Where once there were debates, there are now threats. And where once there was unity, now there is division. The clash, when ideals turned dark. The 1980s. Nigeria itself was under military rule. Dictators silenced voices, and fear ruled the land. On campuses, the fraternities reflected the same hunger for power. At first, they fought with words. Then with fists. Then with blades. What began as noble resistance twisted into something darker. Rivalries turned into blood feuds. Students avoided certain paths at night. Mothers prayed their sons would not cross the wrong group. The question became not just, which brotherhood do you belong to, but, will you survive if you don't belong at all? The fear, shadows beyond campus. By the 1990s, cultism had spilled out of the universities. No longer just a student affair, it stretched into the streets, politics, and business. Imagine a politician in need of loyal or foot soldiers. Imagine ex-students who carried their brotherhood oaths into adulthood. The once campus-based groups now held influence outside the gates of the universities. The line between brotherhood and gang blurred. And yet, for every student who feared them, there was another who still longed to join. Why? Because in a world of weakness, cultism promised strength. In a world of loneliness, it promised family. And in a world of fear, it promised protection. The mystery, secrets that remain. The most chilling part. The secrets. Every cult had codes. Every cult had colors. Every cult had handshakes that outsiders could never guess. A brother could spot a brother in a crowded classroom just by a subtle nod. They could command respect with a chant whispered under the breath. And outsiders only saw the surface. The rumors. The fear. The power. To this day, nobody truly knows how deep the network goes. The final question. So, let's return to that hostel room in 1952. 7 young men. A lantern. A dream of justice. They never imagined what their creation would become. They never imagined that their vision of freedom would grow into something students would fear for generations. But history is like that. Asterisk, was cultism born out of a noble cry for justice? Asterisk, or was it always destined to fall into the hands of power and violence? The answer remains locked in the shadows. When you hear the names pirates, Buccaneers, Vikings, Eiye, Black Axe, do you hear history, or do you hear danger? Was it brotherhood, or was it betrayal? The truth is still hidden. And as long as Nigerian campuses stand, the whispers of the brotherhoods will never truly fade.